Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 362, Tuesday, March the 6th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. What a crazy day today. Wow. There are just so many crazy things going on today. I don't know. It's like crazy day. Things are just crazy. So let's just try to go through it and see if we can sort it out the best we can. Well, last night we talked about the Italian elections, and just as a lot of people were thinking might happen, it did happen. It was an incredible election there in Italy, and it looks like the right wing and the populist parties have won big. The biggest winner was the Five Star Movement, which is what's most closely compared to Trump. It's a kind of a populist anti-EU party, and sort of a Italy first sort of mantra that they claim. So they were the biggest winner with 1/3 of the vote. The Liberal Democratic Party were defeated bigly. They only got 23% of the vote, putting them into a very small minority, and they will in no way, shape, or form be part of the governing coalition. Remember, it's a parliamentary system. So now what has to happen is no party has enough of a majority to be a governing coalition. So they're going to have to form a governing coalition. It's most likely going to be this Five Star Movement getting together with either the Berlusconi party, which is kind of a center party, or the far right party. And I think it will probably be the far right party, because the Berlusconi party, the kind of center right party, they are not for getting out of the EU. They're not for a lot of the things that the populist, the Five Star Movement is for, and they're certainly not for the more far right. So I think that that's what we may be looking at, and that will have a lot to do with whether or not you see a vote to leave the EU, just like they had in Brexit. So we'll have to watch and see exactly how this coalition forms. But if it is the Five Star Movement with this far right wing members, and I don't know how many they've got, but they would need to get enough to have a governing coalition. If they can get those numbers, then you could very well see a Brexit type situation happening in Italy. You're certainly going to see a lot of changes there, because the Five Star Movement, their leading candidate, the main voice of their party, part of his campaign, part of his platform was to deport 500,000 illegals. So we will see if they can get a governing coalition, and if they can, if they actually deport 500,000 illegals, and if they move for a vote to leave the EU. Things are topsy-turvy in Italy right now, and I expect that they're in for a couple of very rough weeks of protest, violence, civil uprisings, and various other things. Things are going to be really ugly there, and they got a lot of problems there in Italy. They really do. And they're chained to the EU because of the financial deal that they cut because of their debt. And, I said this a couple years ago. I think it's almost too late for Italy or Greece or any of these companies to find I don't know if I want to use the word peaceful, but I mean a way out of this thing that doesn't require just a complete meltdown of the EU. The EU is not going to let them go. And once the EU has their hooks into you, and they are your life's blood, we saw what they did to Greece. They threatened to drain all the money out of Greece's banks. That's the kind of hardball that they will play at the EU. They'll do the same exact thing to Italy. Do the exact same thing. They'll say, oh yeah? You want to play with us? Well, guess what? Tomorrow, when you go to the banks and your bank's open, there isn't going to be any money there. Let's see how things look in your country when everybody goes to the bank and they haven't got any money. That's exactly what they did to Greece. We shall watch and see what develops in Italy, but I'm telling you, my friends, the earth is rumbling in Europe, and the breakup of the EU is now in motion. The rise of the nationalist, populist movements in Europe will continue as the disastrous policies of the EU continue to rip that continent apart. It's sad, because ultimately the people who will suffer the most are the people of Europe. Those oligarchs aren't going to suffer. The EU technocrats aren't going to suffer. They may have their plot unfoiled, or foiled, I should say, but ultimately they will not suffer unless they're hanged or something. But I don't think that will happen. I just think that the citizens of Europe made a very bad decision by getting into this EU in the first place, letting it go as far as it did without putting a stop to it, allowing their countries to be destroyed the way they have been. And now when they realize, when it's far too late, that now they want to put their foot down. And I admire them for finally waking up, but I just think it's a little too late for a way out of this thing that doesn't... There's no way out of this, I don't think, without them completely destroying their countries. The EU is not going to allow anyone... You see, Brexit, they had the vote. They won. And you see what's happening there. The EU is not going to let go. And they're a scorched earth type of policy. If they can't have their world government, if they can't have their EU the way that they want it, they're just going to blow the whole damn thing up. And they know who will be the people who will be hurt and will pay the price. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, oh yeah, you don't like our pain? Well, let's show you some more different kinds of pain. And that's what they'll do. They'll say, yeah, we know you hate us, but look what we can do to you. And it's far worse than what we're doing to you now. You don't like us now, watch what we do to you next, and you'll really not like us. That's how they play. I mean, it's I've been watching it now for 7-8 years. Wow. But we'll keep watching, and we'll just see where it goes. But I can tell you that it's not going to end very well for the Europeans. Judicial Watch is now suing for the communications of Bruce Orr. Judicial Watch wants all the communications between the AG's office, Fusion GPS, and Nellie Orr. Let's see if they get them sometime this century. But I applaud Tom Fitton for his efforts. The Democrats have created a Frankenstein, or is that a Frankenstein? One of the two. They've either created a Frankenstein or a Frankenstein monster. Either way, because what they have done is they've created the most radical group of political people in the country, political activists, who are now turning on them. That's what happened in Frankenstein. They created a monster and he turned on them. And that's exactly what the Democrats see happening to them. We've talked about it time and time again with various examples I've given you with Pelosi literally and other Democrats having to literally have security walk them out of speeches and things where they've tried to explain to the radical lefties in their party that what they want is simply not politically viable or very smart. And we see the results. So now, yesterday, we had a group of dreamers who gathered outside the Democratic National Committee headquarters with bullhorns. They were criticizing the Democrats for not passing the new protections for dreamers. Then they blocked the doors, preventing Democrats from entering or exiting the building. And they were chanting, "If you don't let us dream, we won't let you sleep." And they're going to get much worse. Much, much worse. The Democrats have created a monster, and it's turning on them. Just as I said, just as I predicted, in the summer of 2015, I think it was, I began talking about this, and I said this is exactly what was going to happen. And now it's happening. Well, it's been happening, but it's getting worse, and it will continue to get worse. What are they going to do now? That is one incompetent party, man. Well, now BuzzFeed is on their last leg. As I reported to you about a week ago, the attorneys for Mr. Gubarev have already moved on to the final stages of this event in this civil hearing. They know they're going to win. And so they've already gone to this other law firm which specializes in assessing damages in civil suits. And they've already hired them, paid them, and they've already had their findings returned. Which is, the findings were that that Gubarev should go for about $170 million is what he should go for, because they know that they're very close to that. But BuzzFeed, once again, they just refused to stop. So they tried to get the judge to force the DNC to turn over their servers and their server logs and the information from CrowdStrike, and the judge really wouldn't do that. So now it looks like BuzzFeed is going to sue the DNC for the server logs and the CrowdStrike data. And that's not going to fly either. I mean, no one is going to force the Democratic National Committee to turn over their servers and their data and their CrowdStrike data that they paid for to BuzzFeed to try to pull their chestnuts out of the fire because they published the dossier which had fake news in it. It had lies about Mr. Gubarev and his firm. And so he sued them. And he's basically defeated them. But BuzzFeed, I guess they're going to go down swinging. You know, all they really need is for Christopher Steele, their star witness. I mean, he's the guy that we're told put the whole thing together. All they need is for Christopher Steele to come there to Florida and testify and raise his hand and look at the jury and say, yeah, everything that I compiled my dossier is true about Mr. Gubarev's firm, Webzilla, being the ones who hacked the DNC, and here's the evidence. But Christopher Steele will not do that. He refuses to do that, and he cannot do that. That's why he refuses to do it. So this is all that BuzzFeed has left in this world, is to try to sue the DNC, and they're going to fail. It's not going to succeed. I don't know if they're trying to buy time or what they're trying to do, but the judge has got to be just about fed up with BuzzFeed at this point. And like I say, Mr. Gubarev, his attorneys have already moved on to the final, beyond this actual case. They're already working with attorneys on the after it's over, for what you do after it's over, when they assess the damages. Okay? They've already hired the law firm, already had them do the work. They've already gotten the quote of what they should go for. I mean, it's a done deal. It's just a matter of time, how much longer this judge will allow BuzzFeed to continue these delay tactics and ridiculous tactics to try to prove something that they simply can't be proven. Well, here you go. TheHill.com, John Solomon, who I like a lot. I like John Solomon. The FBI never told Congress about Alexander Downer's connection to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. That Downer secured a $25 million contribution to the Clinton Foundation, which of course was picked up by the Aussie taxpayers. Now, as it turns out, that continued, and eventually that amount of money in contributions to the Clinton Foundation from the Aussie taxpayers exceeded $88 million. Now, the funny thing about this story is that when all the talk show pundits got a hold of it, and I'm sure you'll see it tonight on Hannity and Ingram and all the rest, when they got their hands on this information from this story by John Solomon, oh man, I mean, they were all the rage. They're talking about it like it's this great big piece of bombshell news that's just been dropped and this and that and the other thing, and I'm just chuckling to myself because I'm like, really? Because on my TowerGate videos, we covered that and much more about Alexander Downer weeks ago, weeks and weeks ago, months ago actually, we first learned that Alexander Downer donated money to the Clintons, that he's a close personal confidant of the Clintons. We have photos of him with Bill Clinton. We know all about the fact that he cut a deal that essentially, not just him making a personal contribution, but the citizens of Australia, based on Mr. Downer's order to give all this money to the Clinton Foundation. Clearly, there's big connections between Alexander Downer and the Clintons, who of course had the drunken conversation with Papadopoulos, which was supposed to be the new reason why they launched FISA warrants after the dossier was debunked. But then, after the Downer Papadopoulos story was debunked in about 24 hours or less by me and many, many other people, then they had to go back to the dossier. So now they're back to trying to sell the dossier after the failure of the Papadopoulos and Downer drunken conversation in London, which was a setup, as I said. But everybody's all the rage as if this is some great big revelation that everybody wants to jump on. Well, we were talking about this many weeks ago. Well, just wait till they find out the other part of this story, which is that Alexander Downer actually worked for a London-based private intelligence firm, very similar to the intelligence firm that Christopher Steele co-owns Orbis. They're both out of London, and in fact, there are those who suggest that the firm that Mr. Downer worked for was real Cloak and Dagger. Real Cloak and Dagger. And so wait till they find that out. If they think that the revelations that Downer, when he was in his official position in Australia, cut a deal to give all this money to the Clinton Foundation to allegedly fight AIDS, and they think that's a connection, wait till they find out about his other personal connections to the Clintons. And wait till they find out that he too was a private spook for a private intel company that did a lot of cloak and dagger stuff. And that he's all hooked up with all kinds of people in the underworld, including the Clintons. So, we continue to be about 6 months ahead of the curve. Can't wait till they catch up. So the New Yorker magazine is back to trying to sell the dossier again. Now, this story that this reporter wrote, I think it appeared in either Saturday or Sunday's New Yorker, is a story that says that on July the 26th, 2016, Christopher Steele filed a report following the WikiLeaks release of the DNC emails, claiming that the Kremlin was behind the hacking, which was part of a Russian cyber war against the Hillary Clinton campaign. Steele's sources, according to this author, also claimed that the digital attack involved agents, quote, within the Democratic Party structure itself, unquote. Let me say that again. Listen very carefully. This reporter is stating that Christopher Steele has said or has stated at some point that the hack of the DNC was part of a Russian cyber war against the Hillary Clinton campaign, and that Steele's sources also claimed that the digital attack involved agents within the Democratic Party structure itself. Are they going to try and make Seth Rich part of the Russian conspiracy and say that Seth Rich was a Russian agent? I don't know how else to read this. Let's go through this a little closer, shall we? The story says, according to this journalist, so-called journalist, who wrote this piece in the New Yorker this past weekend, says that on July 26, 2016, Steele filed a report following WikiLeaks' release of the DNC emails, claiming that he knew that the Kremlin was behind the hacking. So WikiLeaks releases the DNC emails, and shortly thereafter, Christopher Steele writes another memo, which I assume they're talking about part of the dossier, although I saw nothing in the dossier about this. But that's what this person is alleging, that after the WikiLeaks release, Steele filed a report stating that the Kremlin was behind the hacking. Where would he get that information? What is his evidence for that information? His sources? Well, right now we're trying to find out about those sources. We know one of his primary sources was Jonathan Weiner, the Hillary Clinton State Department, who got the information from Blumenthal, who got it from Cody Shearer, who's an inside Clinton hatchet man. We know that a lot of the open source information that's cited in the dossier came from Nellie Orr, because that's what she did for a living. She speaks Russian, and she read a bunch of Russian papers and magazines and put together the open source material, and that got fixed into the narrative. Then, of course, we had her husband, Bruce Orr, number 4 man in counter intel, or number 2 man in counter intel at the DOJ NSD, accessing the NSA database to get other information, which was also funneled to Nellie and back to Christopher Steele, likely with a ham radio. But where would they actually get this information that the Russians were behind the hacking? To put it in a report? Now, as an intelligence agent, when you put something in a report, they generally expect you to have some evidence. What was Christopher Steele's evidence? Who was his source? Well, unfortunately, the New Yorker, the so-called journalist who broke the story here, doesn't tell us. She's just taking Christopher Steele's word for it. But she's telling us, she's reporting on the fact that Christopher Steele wrote a memo and said these things. But she doesn't say how he would know these things. As far as I know, she didn't give him a call. Say, yes, Mr. Steele, this is so-and-so fake journalist from the New Yorker. I'm doing a story right now that's going to appear in the paper this weekend. And I know that you wrote a report after the WikiLeaks release of the DNC emails claiming that the criminal was behind the hacking, according to your sources. I'm just curious, Mr. Steele, can you provide me with some evidence? Can you fax that over to me? Anything? You can redact the names if you want. Just send me over the evidence so that I can write my story. She did not do that, obviously. And then we get the second part of this, which was to say that the digital attack involved agents within the Democratic Party structure itself. Now that's very interesting. Christopher Steele's sources told him that it wasn't just Russians, but also individuals within the Democratic Party itself. But he doesn't say individuals, he says agents. The digital attack involved agents within the Democratic Party structure itself. I never caught that part. It's the first I've heard of it. That Christopher Steele was not only blaming Russians, but also saying there was some agents within the Democratic Party itself. Is he suggesting that there were Russian agents operating within the Democratic Party who may have had something to do with leaking or hacking that information and getting it to WikiLeaks? Who might he be referring to? The only person we're aware of that has been accused of possibly leaking information or getting information from the DNC and forwarding it over to WikiLeaks is Seth Rich. This almost makes me think that they believe that at some point in the future that we are going to learn that Seth Rich was in fact the person who was involved in leaking these documents to WikiLeaks. And how are they going to handle that? Something tells me from the way that this story is written and the fact that this is even in this story, because it's the first I've heard of it, that they've got a plan. And the plan literally is to now frame, when the truth comes out that Seth Rich was the man who leaked it, they want to be able to come out and say, yes, that's what we heard. Christopher Steele even heard the same thing. And we heard about that, some rumors that Seth had gone to the dark side, that he had been paid by the Russians to get that info. He was upset because Bernie was getting, the shaft. And so they took advantage of that. They paid him to become a Russian agent to get those emails and give them to WikiLeaks to hurt Hillary. That is what this is saying, if you follow it to its next logical conclusion. Have any of you heard, after a year and a half of all we've talked about, and as much as I have looked at every damn piece of information there is that we can look at about what Christopher Steele has admitted to in the civil suits in London and in Florida, and what we have heard from what Glenn Simpson said in his hearings and other people, what we have learned, never have we heard before anywhere, and it's not in the dossier, that Christopher Steele is suggesting that there were Russian agents on the inside of the Democratic Party. This is the first I've heard of that. This is the first I've heard of that, and I don't know where this journalist got that. She pulled it right out of the clear blue sky. And where she's getting this, I would love to see that. If anyone can produce for me any document that will show Christopher Steele in either deposition in London or his deposition in Florida, where he's said anything about there being Russian agents on the inside of the Democratic Party, I would love to hear that. I don't know of anyone that's ever made that claim or said that they heard that Christopher Steele said that, or that any of his sources told him that. Papagalopoulos didn't say anything about that, and I thought he knew everything. This is sure news to me. So why would they put something like this in a story like this? Why would she say that Christopher Steele's sources told him that there was also agents within the Democratic Party and structure itself? There is no real other explanation for that. The only thing I can think of is that they are preparing for the truth to come out that Seth Rich was the person who leaked that information to WikiLeaks, because maybe they know that the noose is closing in, that the various committees are closing in, that there's going to be a special counsel, special prosecutor appointed, and he's going to depose Christopher Steele. He's going to ask him all these questions. He's going to go to those sources. He's going to question all of them. They're going to find out. They're going to get pretty close to the damn truth. He may even want to look at those servers. And if they find out that it was a leak from within the local area network, the LAN, and they determine it was most likely Seth Rich, how are they going to explain that? This is how they're going to explain that. And this is probably what they've threatened Seth Rich's parents with, which is how they've been able to keep them silent. They probably just said, look, here's how this is going to go. We are going to give you a pretty good chunk of money. You'll be comfortable for probably the rest of your life. We're going to make you yearly payments, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, something like that. Every year we're going to give you, if you just shut up, be quiet. And if you don't, and it comes out that Seth did leak that stuff to WikiLeaks, which got Trump elected, which could make you happy because you're both Democrats and all your friends are Democrats, that will be embarrassing for you. But not only that, it's certainly going to look like your son was working with the Russians. Somebody paid him, and we'll find the money. We'll find the proof that he was paid, maybe along with your other son, Aaron. We're paid. And who paid them? I think we can trace that money back to the Russians. Now, how embarrassing is that, Mr. and Mrs. Rich, to find out that your son not only leaked the emails to hurt Hillary and help Trump get him elected, but in fact he was working as a Russian agent and getting paid. That's not stuff that you want all over the news, is it, Mr. and Mrs. Rich? I didn't think so. Take the money and STFU. That's my advice, Mr. and Mrs. Rich. Mad Maxine Waters has promised reparations if Dems win in 2020. Please God, let the Democrats run on reparations in 2020. Please let them run on reparations in 2020. I will actually go out and campaign for Democrats if they'll run on reparations in 2020. I'll donate money. I'll go out and campaign. I'll canvass. Please, vote for this Democrat. Vote for this Democrat in my district, please. Because if they win, we're going to have reparations. Oh. My. This is getting fun. Jimmy Kimmel urges Oscar viewers to march for gun control. Of course, the Oscars were last night. Their ratings were down 20% over last year and the lowest in modern history. People hate the Oscars, and they pretty much hate that pipeline of filth called Hollywood. Hollywood is destroying itself, and it's sad, because back in the golden days of Hollywood, you had some really fine people, really good people as actors out in Hollywood, real patriotic Americans, real sane people out there in Hollywood, good folks, good actors, gave us great films, great stories, great acting. They were patriotic people. They were solid, good Americans. Now look what they've become. The scum, the absolute scum of this earth. Never does Jimmy Kimmel mention that all those movie stars were being protected by hundreds and hundreds of armed police officers and armed private security outside the facility where they were holding the Oscars. So they're all for lots and lots of guns and cops to protect them, but they don't support anyone having guns to protect children. Now, I bet their children go to probably private schools, and they probably have private security, armed private security, guarding them. I bet you most of them got firearm permits, guarded by private security. They can all be guarded by private security. They can all carry guns. They can make movies which glorify shooting semi-automatic weapons as well as fully automatic weapons, hand grenades, bombs, nuclear bombs, and every damn thing else in their movies. No one promotes more gun violence than they do in their own damn movies. They glorify it, do they not? I guess some of you saw this interview with Mr. Nunberg. He was the guy who worked for a little while on the Trump campaign. He doesn't like Trump anymore. He used to, but now he doesn't because Trump fired him. Corey Lewandowski actually fired him. He hates Corey Lewandowski and doesn't like Trump very much. But I guess he was subpoenaed by Mueller to turn over all these emails and all this other stuff. And he's basically telling Mueller, F you. I ain't turning over all my stuff. I'm not appearing in court. I'm not doing any of that. And so he's being asked about, well, how do you feel? I mean, you could be arrested. You're being subpoenaed and you're saying you're not going to, comply with the subpoena. You could be arrested for that, and he's like, I don't care. And, despite the fact that this guy's kind of an a-hole and a little bit whacked out, not sure how he even got involved in the campaign, but it's actually a very good tactic, and I think that this is what a lot of these people should do who are getting these subpoenas from Uncle Bob. He's wanting all their emails going back to 2015 or 2014 or whatever. These people should all just give him the finger, say, go to hell, Uncle Bob. What have you got? What have you got? When you got me on a crime, then you can go ahead and subpoena me, or you can jail me, or you can try to force me to turn over evidence. I don't have any evidence. You know what I would say? I bleach-bitted it all. Sorry, Uncle Bob, I don't have any more emails. I bleach-bitted everything. Oh, and my devices, I destroyed them with hammers. What's he going to say? Apparently, it's now legal when you are supposed to turn over documents from subpoenas. It's now okay if you went ahead and just bleach-bitted it. It's now okay if you destroyed the servers. If you lost some of the computer. I'm sorry, Uncle Bob, I lost that laptop. I had it on the laptop, I lost it. Oh, and that thumb drive, I lost that too. Oh, that computer, I bleach-bitted that. Oh, that handheld device, I'm sorry, I crunched it with a hammer. Sorry, ain't got no evidence. Thanks, Bob. That's exactly what I would say. That's exactly what I would say. My friends, I'm going to tell you right now, I think a lot of you sense this coming. This thing's going to get really ugly, man.